So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another one of these free-for-all siege custom scenario amalgamations that Morris has made. This would be the fourth such battle that we have seen so far, with other such examples including Lothlorien, Erebor on the defence, and then there was the very first incarnation of this as well, way back when. This, however, is going to be involving the hobbits, which are going to be on the defence today, in what I believe is supposed to be a facsimile of BREE. I will probably be naming it as such, although I might get back to him on that to see if that is indeed the intention. But this is a settlement that actually has quite a lot of space within it. So the attackers, there are going to be 3 teams of 2 that are on the attack, and then the rest of the players are going to be congregating in here, attempting to defend. So, as is the case with all of these, the attacker's goal is to be selfish, essentially. They must effectively strike out on their own and attempt to be victorious. In fact, I believe it's not actually 3 teams of 2. I think all of the attacking armies are separate entities, which is not entirely what was in the description of what someone sent to me. But nonetheless, if that is the case, then you have to. It's effectively every man for themselves. Whoever wins the battle for the attackers is the only player who will win. There is going to be no shared victory among the forces that are going to be descending upon the hobbits' defences today. And of course, for the hobbits, they have got the most difficult task, to be fair, of all of the players on the field today, because while there is more than one of them on the defence, everyone's going to be gunning for them, and with the victory condition being, I assume, either the loss of their TC or the complete destruction of their armies at the hands of their enemies, it's going to be quite difficult to weather the storm completely. What they have to hope for is that the attackers turn on one another at some point early on in the battle, enough to the point where they can actually go on to potentially be victorious. But we shall see if the little guys are going to be up to that task. And in a settlement like this, it's going to be fairly difficult because it is fairly open. Seen this kind of setup in the campaigns before for Divide and Conquer and for Vanilla. These walls are fairly low, so you can shoot over them. The hobbits being quite obviously low armour, not exactly the highest in terms of defence values. It's going to be interesting to see, but there are some things within the settlement, like the high ground, the raised terrain, and just the fact that it is going to get quite congested in here in the late game, I would imagine, among all of the attacking armies. Speaking of which, we shall go and have a look at the attacking armies right now as we hop across what is a very deep gorge right in the middle of this map for the first attacking army, which is going to be Tundra's Fox, who's going to be playing as Gondor. And he has got some Gondor Archers here on the front with armour upgrades. It looks like he may be tempted to go after one of his fellow attackers early here, and part of his motivation to do that may be that in order to get to BREE, he may end up coming across one of the other attackers anyway, so why not just set up to fight one of them first. Gondor Archers will be decent in a skirmish fight. They could be useful out here on the open field depending on who he's facing off against, but they will certainly be useful at wearing the hobbits down should he be able to manage to get some of this ammunition through to the point where he can get to the settlement itself later on. Gondor Militia Infantry, which are going to be backed up by some Fountain Guard. That's an interesting combination. We have a low tier, effectively meat shield, which is capable against lower tier units of doing fairly well, but obviously, you know, they're still a militia swordsman, so they're still going to be outclassed by quite a lot of units within the game. But the complexion of this changes completely when you consider that the Fountain Guard are what's backing them up. The heart and soul of any good Gondor army, really. A nice armour-piercing phalanx, which is very, very effective. Could be the sort of thing which, especially in the late game, can make a big, big difference. But they're also the sort of thing that Gondor can't really do much without on the front line. So we'll have to wait and see how quickly Tundra's Fox decides to use them. Pelagia Marines, the only option Gondor have for a Javelin unit. They're fairly run-of-the-mill as far as Javelins go. They're certainly not the weakest in terms of damage, but they're not the strongest either. They can look after themselves well enough in melee, but they're not outstanding in that regard either. Just a simple unit, really. Then, towards the back, we have some Citadel Guard. They're a little bit more versatile as far as an armour-piercing spear unit goes than the Fountain Guard. The Fountain Guard may be stronger at dealing damage in a straight-up engagement, but the Citadel Guard are a little bit more flexible with their shields and the fact that they're not so reliant on being in more of a formation to be effective. So the Citadel Guard, perhaps in the open field, could be a useful deterrent from enemies for coming after them, especially considering cavalry could be at play out here on the open field. Couple of units of them. A catapult, which again could be extremely useful for the settlement, maybe less so out here on the open plains, but if they can get in towards BREE, then the hobbits will really hope that the catapult isn't pointed in their direction and instead at their fellow attackers. The Mithrandir's retinue, we've seen a couple of times of late that multiple HP cavalry, lancers in particular, not necessarily knights, can also be very, very effective And the Mithrandir's retinue are a good example of that because they are very, very tanky. They will struggle against really exceptional units of cavalry from other factions. They don't have the anti-cavalry bonus that many others do, but their durability could be a real boon for them. And I would imagine they're going to be used perhaps in a more defensive way, considering the open field is where they're likely to be their most effective. Lothlorien Honor Guard, going to be a very useful unit. Perhaps you could say they combine the best elements of the Citadel Guard and the Fountain Guard. The big shields of the Citadel Guard, the Fountain Guard obviously with the damage of the Fountain Guard, and then a multiple HP aspect on top of that. It's not quite that simple because they don't have the formation of the Fountain Guard, but it's a close enough comparison, I suppose. A couple of units of Axemen of Lasarnak, the armour piercing, maybe less useful against the Hobbits. I mean, there is a unit in the Hobbit roster in which this would be quite useful against, and that is, of course, the Mighty Ents. And they're going to be pushing up the Ram, so they, along with the civilians over here, look to be on their way to the settlement more directly. But the Axemen of Lasarnak could also be useful against their fellow attackers. Speaking of which, we will be viewing this battle today from the perspective of WK. WK and Morris himself actually sent me the battle replay, but WK got here first, so he's going to be the one who we view from. He's going to be playing as Isengard. Now, the Dunlending Clansmen are a very cheap unit, but having cannon fodder like this is going to be useful. They do have the armour upgrade as well. Something else worth mentioning is that little bit of extra anti-cavalry bonus that they have on top of their being spearmen does make them probably the best of the entry-level fodder units, at least in terms of overall effectiveness that the Orc factions have. They are a little bit more expensive than the likes of the Orc fodder, which may be enough to suggest, for some people to suggest the Orc fodder are actually better. But the Dunlending Clansmen are still here nonetheless. Half-Orc Baneguard are in here, again more armour piercing, could be useful against the Ents for the defenders, but also Gondor are right next to them. That armour piercing, of course, Gondor can't really get away from the fact that armour piercing is always going to be effective against them, given their reliance on their plate armour. But Isengard themselves dip into a bit of a reliance on armour also. The Uruk-hai infantry backed up by the Uruk-hai pikemen is a classic front line, a really solid unit of line infantry that's better than the average line infantry units from the Western Kingdoms of Men, albeit this is about as high tier as Isengard can get in terms of a massable unit of infantry, whereas some of the Western Kingdoms can go a step further. Backing them up with the pikes is also a good idea as well. It gives them that anchor, the extra damage from the Uruk-hai infantry, the defensive aspects of the pikes keeping everything at long range is another good thing. Nazkai, an exceptional armour-piercing bodyguard unit, sort of thing which can lay waste to most other units in a 1 versus 1, not all. That armour-piercing will be really useful against the right kind of targets. The Uruk-hai Berserkers, effectively their little brothers. They do actually have an extra hit point. They have 3 hit points, but to make up for that, the Nazkai have got actually decent melee defense and they have good armor, whereas the Berserkers have neither of those two things. As soon as their hit points are gone, they are very, very vulnerable. More pikes and infantry. He's also got the Champions of the White Hand, WK, which is an exceptional unit of anti-cavalry, possibly the best at this role in the entire game, actually. So, in stark contrast to the Mithrandir's retinue, to be fair, they are pretty much 2 very good cavalry units with 2 very different approaches to that. The Mithrandir's retinue want to stay far, far away from the champions if they can help it. Crossbows can be really, really useful in the later stages as well when they come to trying to take BREE away from the enemy. That stopping power from those bolts is useful even against lightly armoured targets. Uruk-hai Reavers back here pushing up rams as well. They are quite fragile with only their light leather armour. But again, that's more armour piercing, plenty of armour piercing, both at range and in melee that Isengard have. Interesting that they've gone that heavily into that sort of thing, considering they know they're going to have to fight the Hobbits at some point, and it's going to be less useful against them. The third attacking army, we have Mevin, who's playing as Mordor, likely to be even more numerous than Isengard. Isengard didn't bring any siege weaponry though. Mordor have, and they've gone for a troll catapult, so they can cover ground quickly. The trolls themselves will be useful in melee later on. We've got some upgraded temple executioners. They're a little bit more refined, shall we say, than the armour-piercing Nazkai, who are a little bit more brutish and a little bit more focused around dealing with armoured units, whereas the Temple Executioners keep themselves alive better with higher melee defense, with the armour upgrade as well. They've got significantly better armour as well, multiple HP, just a really nice unit for Mordor to have perhaps late on. Lots of armour-piercing back here as well. Mordor don't lack for that, with the Sauron's Will and the upgraded Orc Maulers and the Uruk Captains in here also. Another unit of cavalry in the Ardenheim Lancers. They're a non-multiple HP cavalry unit though, so Mevin will have to be on his toes to use them effectively, especially given the other cavalry units that we've already seen so far. Temple Guard, armour-piercing arrows. Who knows what situation they could be useful for in this kind of battle. They could go after Ents or Bjornings if they're going directly for the settlement, or they could go after their fellow attackers should the need arise. A very large army this from Mordor, perhaps unsurprisingly, given the nature of the battle, trying to make a play for that dominance on the field. Lots of Moran on infantry pushing up the rams. Orc fodder over here, like I said, exceptionally cheap, you may as well bring them. And then Orc javelins, said several times lately what they're all about, very hard to use them inefficiently. Orc archers, and then at the back over here some Minas and Morgul chosen near this lake. The fourth attacking army, we have Lothlorien, played by Morris, so this is going to be a far more quality-centric army than the ones we've seen so far. Gondor maybe a little bit more, but Riders of the Golden Wood, so this unit of cavalry, what they have in their favour, of course, is they can shoot the other cavalry and they can run away from it fairly easily with their Silverthorn arrows, doing lots of damage as they do so. They're pretty good in melee as well, honestly. They take on the Ardenheim Lancers without too many problems. Mithrandir's retinue they would probably defeat, but it would take them a little while to get through that armour. They want to stay away from something like the Champions of the White Hand, though. That's where their identity as a horse archer will really start to lay them low against dedicated anti-cavalry units. Spears of the Wood, they may need to be a little bit careful when things get a little bit grisly when it comes to being an all-out brawl for the settlement, because their lighter armour may start to cause them some problems there, but they're a fantastic spear unit other than that, for their price. Woodland Protectors, Lorenaard Axemen over here, a full lineup of heavier Lothlorien units, including the Lorien Swordmasters, pointing towards Mordor, who are on the other side of that little hamlet there, on the outskirts of BREE, including Kindred of Celeborn and Marchwarns of the Wood. I find it very unlikely that Mordor would attack into Lothlorien when they've got a position occupied on this hill anyway, but Morris has got his ranged units pointing in that direction regardless. 3 units of Galatharan Blade Masters with the armour upgrade, pushing the rams. And I would imagine as well there's going to be more hidden units in amongst the trees at the top there, but probably Karen Amroth Rangers. There could be some Staff Masters as well. Now then, the 5th army that's on the attack, the Dwarves of Kazadum, played by Eclipse 2500. Their armour is going to serve them very well in a mosh pit battle later on, you would imagine. Sentries of Khazad-dum and miners going to be pushing the rams. I'd be surprised if the pikes were the first ones in, because it would give the hobbits an ideal target with even their entry-level archers. This, however, is where the dwarves could potentially clean up their really heavily armoured Legion units. The 4th Legion Shield Guard with the armour upgrade, a fantastic unit for digging in and perhaps claiming some territory within the settlement. The Locked Morale Hammers of Gundabad could be useful against the Ents for the reasons we've already said, but also against factions like Mordor, Isengard and Gondor. Even Lothlorien's Lorenaard units, to be honest, that armour piercing is going to be very, very nice, but the Locked Morale is pretty key. It's going to mean that once Khazad Dum dig into the settlement, it's going to be difficult to get rid of them unless you can kill them off entirely, which is certainly easier said than done. Sons of the Fallen help with that as well, a really fantastic unit of spears. In behind, plenty of warriors of Khazad-dum and orc hunts of Khazad-dum, just to give the dwarves enough numbers to be able to sustain a long-term engagement against some of the more numerous armies on the field, such as Mordor. Khazad-dum Reclaimers for dealing with those stubborn dug-in positions that enemies may be getting themselves into. Very high damage unit of axe throwers, and also once they're out of ammunition, unlike quite a few other axe throwers, they are actually pretty decent in melee as well, with an armor-piercing 2-handed axe. 3 hit points on the Mithril Guard, and unlike the Uruk-hai Berserkers we've already seen, they have got oodles of armour to back that up, so they're an incredibly tough unit to kill. In fact, of all the 3 HP bodyguards, they are probably the most difficult to kill. The Farazim Swordmasters have got a lack of a shield after all, and they're a little bit more damage focused rather than the Mithril Guard, which are certainly more focused around their ability to stay alive and weather the storm. And the 1st Legion Pikes. If the 1st Legion Pikes are left alive in the late game, it's going to be very, very tough to dislodge them. That armour piercing really helps them out, as I've said in the past. But Khazad-dum are very, very close indeed to a 2nd Mordor army, played by Wojciech, who has got some Moran infantry over here. Got some orc fodder as well, orc archers, a couple of units of Moran infantry as well, Moran infantry, Moran halberds, Blackguard of Barad-dûr, those Great Shield units, which I'm surprised to see Mevin didn't bring. Great Shield infantry can be so effective in this situation, but perhaps you don't want to be so aggressive with units such as this, because if you push in too quickly, that's a surefire way to put yourself at a bit of a disadvantage. The first ones to attack the hobbits, after all, are likely to get betrayed by someone sooner rather than later. Plenty of fodder. I mean, the halberds as well are a useful thing just to have a bit of an anchor. Maybe Mevin wants to be a little bit more fluid than Wojciech over here, whereas he wants a surer place to stand. Orc Javelins, Uruk Captains, Armour Piercing, like we said, the Nazgul and the Olag High, 2 units we also didn't see from Mevin, so very different approaches here from the two Mordor players. He's also gone for Temple Inquisitors, which I like this pick a little bit better, to be honest, with the armour upgrade, because they're a unit of melee cavalry. I find it hard to believe the Ardenine Lancers would be super useful in a situation like this, but we'll have to wait and see. Orc Maulers and Sauron's Will here at the back, so more of an armour-piercing presence back over here as we get lost within the trees. And before we plod towards the start of the battle, let's go through the defenders as well. Froggy and Cannon Fodder on the defence with two Hobbit armies. Longbottom mob, again, it's all going to be about whether the Hobbits can do damage quickly enough once the attackers get in here, but also hoping the attackers turn on one another at some stage, because if they all gang up on the defenders, it's obviously going to be all over for them. There's no way they can take on this amount all on their lonesome. The Longbottom mob, though, could be really useful for dealing with some of those unshielded units. The Farmers of Buckland have got a really nasty charge on them, and if there's one thing the Hobbits don't lack for, it's armour piercing, so this is where factions like Lothlorien may have a little bit of an edge, actually, because they're the only ones that aren't really reliant on their armour. Mordor, Isengard, Khazad Dum, Gondor, all of which are certainly armour-centric factions to some degree or another, in very different ways, quality and quantity-wise. Lothlorien less so. Longbottom mob here. Hobbitry in arms, as well as some Proudfoot Protectors with the stakes here guarding the gates. Obviously Proudfoot Protectors are going to be an absolutely vital part of the Hobbit defence. If they are to win this battle, they will need their Proudfoots to be on form. Farmers of Buckland, another unit of Proudfoots. They've set up stakes, probably not pointing in the direction they wanted them to. I think they wanted them to point towards the gate again, but no matter. It's unlikely the cavalry can force its way through the sheer amount of basic spears the Hobbits have anyway. Band of Brass Archers, bit of an armour-piercing melee attack, which is always useful from your skirmishers, the fact they can chip in melee. Band of Brass Archers and Hobbitry in arms once again. Plenty of Farmers of Buckland littered throughout the settlement. There's obviously going to be plenty of Proudfoots as well. Going into the red limit on a unit like that is definitely worth it. A veritable grove of Ents, which have taken root in the town centre. They'll be difficult to dislodge, surrounded by battling Brandybucks and some more Band of Brass Archers. That's going to be a lot of damage that they are capable of dealing. Plenty of Hobbitry in arms over here, plenty of Longbottom mob, more Band of Brass Archers. I would imagine there is actually a Gandalf's Firework launcher as well. If they can get into a good position for that, that could be devastating in the late game. You know, they could hit several teams worth of units, including their own if they're not careful. And then I would imagine there's probably some more hidden units from the Hobbits as well. Like, I'd be surprised not to see Dunedain Rangers, unless there was a rule to use only Hobbit units. I would suggest that Dunedain Rangers would be an extremely useful unit to use. But yeah, I quite like the fact that the Palisade is also around here. There's plenty of features on this map which will add a lot of interest. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what is the first engagement in this battle. I think Khazad Dum and Mordor over there are closest to one another, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, I don't actually think it'll be the Hobbits coming under attack that is the first thing. I think it'll be some sort of peripheral engagement that happens first. We'll just have to wait and see. I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin for when that happens. So as we start to get down to business here, it does occur to me that I have made a little bit of a blunder in the army composition phase, and that is of course that the two Mordor players are on the same team, so one of the attacking armies actually does have more than one player on it, which makes things a little bit more chaotic than they already were. But I suppose if these armies are indeed after the One Ring that Frodo carries, it makes sense that maybe Mordor would bring a little bit more to the table than everyone else who is attacking, but by the same token, it also means that Mordor, of all the attacking armies, probably have the biggest target painted on their back. It remains to be seen what the other attacking armies will do about this, especially considering that Mordor are actually adjacent to the Dwarves and the Elves, which perhaps are two foes that you would not want to be directly next to in this sort of situation. Although having said that, I mean, I don't think any of the... Maybe Gondor, Mordor would fancy their chances against 9 times out of 10 with their numbers and their ability to swarm over them in a large open field like this, but I mean, even Isengard have got the right tools to take on Mordor in a one-on-one encounter, I would suggest, given the reliability of their front line and also their cavalry support and the armour piercing that they bring to bear. Perhaps not exactly what they would want to be seeing. Mordor, this army going to be sitting right here in the middle of the road, perhaps in a little bit of danger of getting themselves caught between Isengard and the Elves of Lothlorien if they're not too careful. Although it does appear that the Lothlorien Elves are going to be moving directly northward to perhaps engage with the Dwarves and the other Mordor army, so Mevin perhaps a little bit fortunate that he's not going to get pincered between Isengard and the Elves. Being next to this large gorge was potentially a bit of a banana peel for him. From the Temple Inquisitors, so going to go after the dwarves right from the off, and the Warriors of Khazad Dum are the unit that are sticking out here, so one swift charge into them is going to be fairly effective. They are going to try and counter-charge here, but this is one of the few dwarven units that is not going to be all that well prepared for dealing with this sort of thing in sustained melee when you consider all of the shock infantry and other sort of things. Riders of the Golden Wood also going after the dwarves, shooting into the Orcans of Khazad Dum, getting a bit of collateral damage onto the Khazad Dum reclaimers as well. So perhaps seeing the dwarves as a bit of a threat, the frame rate taking a little bit of a nosedive as Mordor coming in very aggressively onto the dwarves here as they were transitioning across the field as well. So now Eclipse is going to have to organise his army for a fight, and he's going to have to hope actually that Lothlorien don't come in and attack him from the rear, because if that happens there's no real way that the dwarves can win that fight. But in a straight up one-on-one against Mordor, I think the dwarves will fancy their chances. There's a lot of units all together all at once here, so we'll have to pan out to see what's going on overall. Temple Inquisitors charging in to more of the Dwarven infantry units over here. They need to get a little bit more organised here. The dwarves are a little bit too much of a blob for my liking, and the Dwarven miners already routing. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr will buckle the less numerous parts of the Dwarven front line, such as over here with the sentries, plenty of morale on infantry. Orc archers and javelins will be getting into position as well, so the numbers of Mordor here with this quick attack from Wojciech actually proving to be really quite effective at this moment in time. This, of course, will be good news for the hobbits. They'll be very glad to see two armies going at one another hammer and tongs like this, although the frame rate certainly isn't too keen on seeing this. Riders of the Golden Wood from Morris, the scenario creator, now coming over here to attack and shoot into the Temple Inquisitors, who've been used pretty well so far by Wojciech. But this is also a sign that Lothlorien are not going to blindly shoot into only the dwarves. They are going to try and cut down on some of Mordor's influence on the field as well, which is definitely the right thing to do, given that with their two armies they can afford to maybe be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more gung-ho than the other attacking armies on the field, which is perhaps why we're seeing Mordor be so incredibly aggressive right from the outset. Froggy's Bjornings are out here, so we're going to get out onto the open field. The hobbits getting involved, trying to chip away, perhaps seeing the fact that with all of these numbers Mordor could overrun the dwarves, although the initial shock effect that they've had on the dwarven front line is starting to dissipate now as the dwarves start to dig in, and as soon as that happens their quality will start to have more and more of an impact. Charging into the Orc Javelins there, good hit from the Bjornings. They are shaken, however. What's going on here? They are now retreating entirely en masse, seeing that perhaps now they're drawing the attention of the hobbits and the elves. They're going to pull back Wojciech, and this is dangerous because if the dwarves do try to pursue them, you can see actually already several rather large units of the more basic orcs are starting to run for the hills. Being this close to the red line, there's every chance that even full units that are in routing that would have otherwise come back might reach the edge of the map before they actually do so. That has proven to be a very damaging encounter, and in the end Eclipse managing to organise his army enough to the point that the initial troubling signs that we saw from the dwarves were stabilised pretty quickly. But this isn't good for Khazad Dum either, because they definitely took their fair share of losses from that encounter. Khazad Dum reclaimers taking a bit of loss, taking a bit of damage. The Hammers of Gundabad are doing just fine, sentries of Khazad Dum, but yeah, the dwarves probably going to have to try and ease up, maybe not attack into the settlement as quickly as they otherwise would have wanted. It's a little bit interesting. Hobbits also leaving the relative safety of their settlement to come out here with a unit of hobbitry and arms on the bridge. I mean, this bridge is a pretty nice defensive position, all things considered, but to come out here does leave you open to an attack from the rear, and coming out here with just one unit of hobbitry and arms, they're not going to be a match for the Minas Morgul Chosen, so it's effectively throwing one of your units under the bus, which the hobbits can't really afford too much of. They've got plenty of numbers for a defending faction, but none of them, well, very few of them are of particularly high quality, so they need to be a little bit careful. Gondor, perhaps as expected, have a free run up this side of the map, so they are going to take that. But this side of the settlement is also maybe a little bit, it's definitely less easy to attack, because this bit of terrain of course means that you're going to be a little bit more limited in how you can attack the walls of the settlement. And I doubt, to be honest, if Gondor are going to be moving forward all that quickly. The elves now completely turning around, having already seen that maybe they can't do so much more damage over here, trying to come in and be the third party up here to liberally cause damage to both their dwarven and orcish opponents. But now, given the fact that these two armies have disengaged from one another, there's not really too much to be gained from them attacking over here anymore. And chaos continues to reign. Now over here, Rise of the Golden Wood thinking about charging in there. Hobbitry and Arms actually turning around completely now. I'm a little bit confused as to why they were out here in the first place for reasons I've already mentioned, but are they going to try and catch up to the Riders of the Golden Wood? I mean, I highly doubt that Morris is going to allow his high tier unit of cavalry to be caught by these Hobbit spears. He very nearly did. Over here, I mean, we are seeing this battle from WK's perspective. The Isengard player, he's making his way towards the outskirts of the settlement now with his army, and he's also pushing up the rams in behind. So Isengard could very well be the first ones to actually attack the settlement here. They have a fairly clear run at it. The bridge over there is pretty, well, yeah, it is the bridge over there that Mordor perhaps are going to look to try and cross, or directly in behind Isengard is really the problem that Isengard may encounter. They'll have to keep an eye on what Gondor and Mevon's Mordor army does, but eventually someone is going to have to attack BREE itself, and that's when things could start to get pretty chaotic indeed. Meanwhile, Lothlorien squaring up against Mordor, and this is going to be interesting because once again Morris going after and going to be doing damage to another of the Mordor players, and perhaps what I said at the start of the game is starting to play out a little bit. Mordor having two armies, on the face of it, is a big advantage. It means they can throw their weight around more freely, but the fact that it paints a real target on your back can be a problem. In free-for-all situations like this, you often want to go unnoticed for as much of the battle as you can, and having such an extreme numbers advantage among the attacking factions here is certainly not going to give you that effect as Mordor. Kindred of Celeborn firing into the heart of this Mordor army, perhaps going after the Temple Executioners. They'll hit the Maulers in behind as well, so all unshielded units, all very worthwhile going after as the laser-like projectiles of the Kindred come in here. Temple Guard as well. Mordor starting to respond in kind with their own archers. It is also the catapult which may cause a bit of damage as well. Orc fodder acting as a screen on the front line, but of course the basic Orc spear is going to be no match for the basic Elven spears. So these light Lothlorien units, they'll really like being in melee with particularly the entry-level Mordor units. That's where they're really going to be at their most efficient, and there's not a huge amount that the Mordor missiles can do to answer this challenge either. Lorenan Swordmasters coming in as well to offer some real genuine quality on that front line. So Mevon's going to have to engage more fully over here. It means that he cannot take advantage perhaps of Isengard being the first ones to go in and do a little bit of damage to his fellow Orcs. Ooh, that was, I think, equal parts friendly fire and hitting the Lorien units there. Lorien going in pretty heavily here though on Mordor. The Temple Inquisitors from Wojciech coming over to try and help his ally out, but all they're really going to be able to do is ensure that these reinforcement units of Staff Masters are not going to be able to get to the front line. They could try and get in and amongst the archers as well to prevent this pummeling that Mordor are taking at the hands of the Elven Bowmen. Right back to that in just a moment, however, as WK's Isengard army have reached the walls, or at least they are now adjacent to the walls, which means the arrow towers and all of the Hobbit missiles, which there are plenty of them, are going to have their first juicy target. And this is the entirety of the Isengard army, really. So you can really pick and choose your targets. First port of call would certainly be the Uruk-hai pikemen. More than once recently we've seen them be really quite effective indeed. So far the Hobbits will be just grateful that they have the opportunity here to just do a little bit of damage here and there. Champions of the White Hand still loitering. Mithrandir's retinue from the Tundra's Fox as well, so everyone using their cavalry units rather fiendishly throughout the battlefield. They're just trying to take pot shots at all of the other attacking armies, even the Bjornings, of course, of the Hobbits getting involved. This is really bad news for Mordor. They are being given a bit of a lesson in infantry quality here by Lothlorien. Halberdiers trying to shore up the line, which, to be fair, that phalanx is one method that they can use to really help out. Also, it's going to be hard to tell. Well, I say hard to tell, easy to miss the effect that all of this cavalry could have, as it is looking more and more like the Mithrandir's retinue and the other units of cavalry are maybe focusing on Lothlorien a little bit more so than Mordor, perhaps seeing that stuff like these Morannon units are going to really struggle against the Lorenan as this continues. It's not really a fight that the Ardenheim Lancers are going to want too much of a part in, to be honest. The Riders of the Golden Wood will easily have the better of them. Oof. This catapult as well could easily turn this front line around. They're not getting humongously damaging hits, but they are streaking their ammunition right through the elven lines. If they can get a good hit, even the elves may start to rout in the face of such things. Having a look over here, Gondor starting to set up their infantry organisation over here. Longbottom Mob, or Bandbrass Archers starting to take a few pot shots. What's going on over here? Proudfoot Protectors moving backwards. Whatever happens to the Mordor army in the north? Possibly it's entirely hidden at this point, because I mean this is only the Dwarves. Eclipse 2500 going to be moving into BREE from the north, while Lothlorien continuing to wrap up the lines, punching through the middle and then moving forward. Spears of the Wood and Galathan Blade Mercer trying to follow through. The Minas Morgul Chosen's armour will really help actually against these Elven Swordsmen. They'll struggle to do damage in return, but they won't be quite as fragile as a lot of the more basic units. But this cavalry is starting to get some pretty decent hits actually. This is a bit of a gamble by Lothlorien, because regardless of the outcome of this fight, they're going to be damaged. If they can manage to defeat Mordor in their entirety, then fair enough. I'm not sure whether they're going to have the numbers to actually do so. Sauron's well in the background. Mavin has got some reinforcements. I don't think Lothlorien will have that luxury, and indeed Wojciech's coming in now, so he's sent his army all the way around and he's going to reinforce his ally. This means the Mordor armies are now going to be joining up with one another, and it's terrible news for Lothlorien because they are now caught. They are the first faction really to be truly enveloped. It looked like that could happen to the Dwarves, but that fight broke up before that could truly manifest itself. Mithrandir's retinue continuing to bully Lothlorien as well. So it could be, well, the Mithrandir's retinue also rout in the face of all of this, but it's bad news for the elves. At this point you may have to start looking at trying to sequester a couple of units away in the trees and hope they go unnoticed, because there's not really much hope of you being able to fight your way out of this one. Mithrandir's retinue running away. It's also worth saying as well that Isengard went right along the walls, taking damage as they did so, but they didn't elect to go for that gatehouse over there. They have instead set up in front of this one. So while he hasn't been too involved in any sort of infantry fighting, he's taken a bit of damage, WK, but he's biding his time waiting to begin the assault on the settlement. Gondor, Khazad Dum and Isengard all, at this point, pretty much in place to try and make a move on the settlement should they choose to. The two Mordor armies and Lothlorien, of course, still hammering away at one another over here. The champions of the White Hand have been getting involved. All of the mounted Nazkai very much bloodied. The elves continuing to fight the good fight, but Mavin will be really pleased with how this has gone, I think. It looked initially, once again, the initial fight looked to be going in Lothlorien's favour, but with everything around the fight starting to affect it, there goes Haldir. The reinforcements from Mordor, the other units of cavalry, and also the sheer numbers that Mavin himself had to hold on to on the front line. The fight down here also turned around. This time, however, unlike with the Dwarves and Wojciech's Mordor army in the north, where it was a fairly damaging encounter for both, but it wasn't really decisive, this could very well take the elves out of the running in the earlier stages of this fight. And do they have anything left at this point would be the question. I highly doubt it's anything useful. I mean, two Riders of the Golden Wood. Marchwarns of the Wood at this point are trying to escape, but he's trying to escape with some units now, but will he be allowed to? I suppose they may let him get away with some of them, because the only thing they can really pursue him with effectively would be cavalry, and that is starting to get a little bit thin on the ground. Kindred of Caliban, I mean, if you keep them alive to the late game and it turns out to be a really, really close encounter, it is the sort of unit that can win you the fight, and that's what Lothlorien at this point are going to have to base their fight on. Mordor have now regrouped, so both Mordor armies at this point fairly damaged, but between the two of them they can make up a full strength army. It all works out in the end. Meanwhile, this Gondorian catapult, there is only one remaining. I do wonder how such a thing was allowed to happen. And they are going to break through the palisade walls, of course. Palisade walls, much like in Edoras, you can use the rams to break through the walls and not just the gatehouses, which is good news for Gondor, because it means that they aren't completely stopped from getting into the settlement from this angle. I have to say, Tundra's Fox so far has perhaps had the cleanest approach, and he will be the first one to enter the settlement as well. Isengard haven't had too much to do either, but they did get strafed by all of the hobbits. Out come the hobbitry in arms, battling brandybugs and some farmers of Buckland, so they're going to try and deal with the civilians pretty quickly here, and they should be able to. There's a few Gondor Archers up on this hill, but they've been soundly ripped apart by all of the hobbit missiles that lurk within the settlement. And these civilians are going to be doomed. Interestingly enough, against the more basic hobbit units, this may be an opportunity for the Gondor militia infantry to actually shine, so they may as well be used at this moment. The real question is anything else happening now? Uruk-hai Reavers being pushed forward with the ram. Interesting choice for a ram pushing unit. What's going on over here? Doesn't seem to be going all that well for the dwarves over here. A little bit of sally out for the hobbits, and this is just making the dwarves approach that little bit more difficult, allowing the arrow towers and all of the missile units that the hobbits have to inflict some not insubstantial casualties on the dwarves. Quite a few corpses lying around here, nothing too draining, but given the losses that the dwarves have already sustained, they can't afford to take too much more punishment like this. If they do want to get up into the settlement, I mean, obviously the way that the dwarves will want to fight the hobbits is in straight up melee. Even though the hobbits have got some pretty nasty armour piercing, they certainly don't have the quality to go toe to toe with Khazad Dum in an outright brawl. Meanwhile, are they still pursuing the elves? Are they still eager for Lothlorien to have nothing left? It does look like that. Mordor hunting them down by way of revenge, perhaps? I mean, they are still alive, I suppose, but is it truly worth Mordor's time to commit this many resources? Maybe it is. Maybe it gives them the excuse to not get involved in the fight for the actual settlement until later on, where they can sweep in and clean up. What is going on here? A close range hit from the Gondorian catapult could prove to be fairly costly, this, for the hobbits, given the fact they have actually committed a fair few units forwards. Mithrandir's retinue are still here. They returned from routing. This is going to be really bad news for the hobbits. These are pretty much ideal hits that almost can't be missed by the Gondorian catapult. And this sally out could prove to be a little bit of a disaster. Gondor militia infantry will struggle a little bit more against stuff like farmers of Buckland, but again, they're continuing to send more units out, which is bold. I mean, this unit of Banderbrass Archers is going to go around this house over here and try and get in from the side, but I don't really see what they stand to gain from this. If Hunter's Fox plays his cards right, he could inflict some pretty hefty damage on the defending factions here. You can see all the pebbles kind of stuck to the roof, floating in midair now, but the dwarves now have a way into the settlement as well. Isengard and Khazad Dum could start putting pressure on the hobbits here, which is going to be more bad news for them. As is the way of the defenders, it's going to be fairly difficult for them as the battle goes on if they don't ration their resources effectively. Warriors of Khazad Dum, I mean, they have their ways into the settlement here at this point, the dwarves, but the longer they just loiter around out here, the more of a problem it's going to be for them. Only 12 Warriors of Khazad Dum pushing up that ram. They may end up all dying as a result. You can see here that Isengard not too far away from Khazad Dum's entry points as well. The Proudfoot Protectors being engaged in melee by the Uruk-hai Reavers, not wanting to get shot by them, but the Proudfoot Pikes and the Ents will of course rout the Reavers pretty quickly, which is good news, because the Ents, the Uruk-hai Reavers are going to be one of those units which could be surprisingly effective against the Ents if you commit them as part of a general advance. Uruk-hai Berserkers certainly will. The Ents need to be very, very careful about getting involved with them. You can see there the Uruk-hai Berserkers taking a bit of a beating from the long bottom mob that are nearby as well. Those pebbles not the most damaging, but they will start to chip away at the 3 HP that the Berserkers carry. But yeah, the Ents don't really want to be in there with the Berserkers. Especially not the Berserkers that haven't really taken a great deal of damage yet. The Nazkai are also going to get into the long bottom mob, which of course is an extremely one-sided affair. Going to get torn apart. A good opportunity this for WK to start pushing into the settlement. There's still units being committed out here. They've not been shy about sending units outside of their walls here, the hobbits, but I think more often than not so far in this fight that has been to their detriment more so than their benefit. Isengard and Gondor in good positions to take advantage of that. Another unit over here. Farmers of Buckland, defeat seems certain. Surrounded by Uruk-hai and Dunlanders. Partially surrounded anyway. now completely surrounded because thanks to the champions of the White Hand. And of course, with the town centre being here, it's not even as if the hobbits can elect to retreat up onto that hilltop and make it a one choke point affair. They have to defend the settlement more actively than that. And more, I think already at this point, what I would be looking at as the hobbits is hoping that the attackers, once the fighting starts to spill into the streets within, which is inevitable, that the attackers start to try and tear lumps out of one another more so than the hobbits. Plenty of walls going down now, the dwarves several ways into the settlement at this point. Catapult, perhaps out of ammunition, nope, still continuing to fire. Still the Gondor militia infantry not really able to get too much of a foothold, but this is the engagement where they will be at their most useful, so definitely an understandable thing. This unit of Bandabras Archers completely surrounded once again by the low-tier Gondorians. Unsurprisingly, again the hobbits paying the price for standing directly in front of that catapult. And this time it's a very healthy amount of Proud for protectors. Time and time again they've been really the most effective hobbit unit. As much as we've seen the Great Eagles, the Bjornings and the Ents, all of these specialty units that they have, it's very often been the Proudfoots that have been continuously reliable. More Longbottom mob throwing their projectiles in. The Nazkai leading from the front. They have taken a few losses, which is not too surprising given all of the throwing projectiles that the hobbits have over here. Being joined now by a unit of Baneguard as well, however. These poor hobbits wielding basic wooden clubs are going to be no match for the most dangerous orcs that Saruman can create. Rakai Berserkers again. This is bad news for the hobbits. A unit of Proudfoots completely surrounded. On both sides by dangerous and damaging units. Certainly the Berserkers. The question remains though, what will the dwarves do? I mean, Longbottom mob, lots of hobbits being committed out here, but none of them are going to be able to, again, willingly trying to enter a brawl with Khazad Dum. This is exactly what I said the dwarves would have wanted the engagement to be like. Trying to keep them outside the walls and maybe hit them with more missiles is the... perhaps I can only guess that that's the reasoning behind what the hobbits are doing, but it doesn't look as though there's all that many missiles left to utilise for them in this part of the field. And the arrow towers are not going to do damage quickly enough for this to have been a worthwhile endeavour, in my opinion. We'll have to wait and see. All kinds of Khazad Dum moving forward. Can't imagine they used up a great deal of their ammunition, to be honest with you, because it's a very fast and furious fight that they had with Mordor in the outer reaches. What's going on over here? Lothlorien continues to be chased by Mordor. The Benny Hill theme music should be being played here as Morris continues to get hounded by Mordor. It is just going to... ultimately it's not going to be that useful for either of those two. Wojciech's Mordor army has broken off the pursuit now though, and he will perhaps start heading towards the settlement as well. I mean, it's something for WK to consider if that Mordor army starts to attack from this angle. As much as he's made pretty good inroads against the hobbits, the last thing he wants is for a remnant of a Mordor army to also be attacking from the rear. Not so much because I think he would necessarily lose that fight. He still has enough left in the tank, I think, if he sets up right to carry that fight through, but that can only be good news for Khazad Dum and especially Gondor. Gondor at this point looking pretty decent. Gondor Archers continuing to shoot. Is there anything out here that they are actually... they're firing into that blob? Still Mithrandir's retinue, Citadel Guard defending from the rear, plenty of reserves, Axemen of Lasarnak moving in. A little bit of extra damage to try and cleave through what remains. I mean, even with the catapult over here, it wasn't actually as dominant a fight, and I have to take it back, those Gondor militia infantry, at the hands of some of the more damaging units that the hobbits can bring to bear, they were actually pretty poor. The Gandalf's Fireworks here, but they don't have the angle at all. Probably the worst angle you'll ever see for the Gandalf's Fireworks, having to shoot up and over a hill. That's not what you need. You need to be on the high ground shooting down, if at all possible, with a unit like that. But you don't want to do that within the settlements at this point with the hobbits, because your own units are in there as well, and it can be such an erratic thing. It can do a lot of damage to a lot of units very quickly, but when several of those units are yours, it may not be the best idea. Axemen of Lasarnak coming in. beginning to hew their way through another poor unit of Longbottom Mob. Very much out of their element here with the kind of units that they're being asked to try and fight. I mean, they are AP, but that's pretty much it. They continue to try and sally out of the walls. Very courageous performances from the hobbits, but perhaps a tad foolhardy. What do they have still in the town centre? Band of Brass Archers. I mean, at this point, with the hobbits struggling on multiple fronts, a play for the town centre might not be the worst thing in the world if you really commit to it, but we saw the dangers of being very aggressive and committing to a fight earlier on with the fate that Lothlorien met at the hands of Mordor. Defeat seems certain for all of these basic hobbits as the Uruk-hai infantry move in, but Mordor are here now. Wojciech has arrived. As a result, WK has moved almost all of his army within the walls, and he can use the walls' choke points now to his advantage. This is interesting as well. He's also squaring up a little bit against the dwarves, perhaps seeing that the hobbits are continuing to struggle, and the dwarves will be a very good target for his crossbowman. That's what he's going after. Hammers of Gundabad would be a fairly good target. First Legion pikes would be an extremely good target if you can shoot at them. Might be going after Sons of the Fallen as well. I mean, you can't really miss at this point, unless you're going after the most basic of Khazad Dum units, but he's in danger of being spread a little bit thin here, WK. He's still having to advance against the hobbits, but now he's going to have to defend against Khazad Dum and Mordor. Does he have the ability to do that? His pikes are going to get into position. His pikes are a little bit more healthy than these dwarven ones, and he should be okay for the time being. First Legion pikes are a very scary sight for a faction like Isengard, however. More crossbowmen are moving in. Orc fodder are there. I mean, an opportunity this for Wojciech if he can seize it. Maybe fighting a war on too many fronts could be WK's undoing here if he's not careful. Right, where on earth did... Nevin's over here. Did he end up catching Lothlorien in the end? I've genuinely got no idea. Maybe we'll see Lothlorien pop up again in the late game with 1 or 2 units. We shall have to wait and see. The dwarves now very much within the settlement, and the fight now will be a fight on the streets. The First Legion pikes, I mean, they are outnumbered here. They need to be a little bit careful. If their formation gets buckled by the Bane Guard and then the Uruk-hai pikes can anchor that up, it's not great for them, but as long as they can keep their formation here, as long as they get backed up appropriately, Isengard could be in a little bit of trouble here, but this is fairly dependent on what Mordor do, actually. It does look as though Mordor are actually not interested in engaging with Isengard for the time being, which is going to be bad news for Khazad Dum. All of this continues to be good news for the Gondorians, who have taken a fair amount of losses themselves, but Gandalf's Firework crew getting run through as well. More stones being thrown. More units being committed over here. I mean, that is perhaps the flip side of this. As much as Gondor have done pretty well in their engagement, it's been clean, it's been by the book. The hobbits have been fairly eager to commit reinforcements over to this side of the field, so Thunderous Fox is having to consistently work. And he hasn't actually claimed any territory as such yet. He's not in the settlement itself. Every other faction other than Mordor and I guess Lothlorien, I'm not entirely sure. Is that them? Possibly not. I'm trying to bombard the town centre from fairly long range. I mean, I suppose if you do end up hitting, you can end up taking out some Ents, which would be a bit of a boon, but if I was an attacker at this point, I wouldn't necessarily be looking at the hobbits as the biggest threat that there is. They did get a grazing hit there on the Band of Brass Archers. For me, if I were an attacker, I would be looking at my fellow attackers at this stage, trying to claim territory carefully as they move forwards. Uruk-hai crossmen moving in. I mean, the dwarves have got a pretty strong clutch of units over here, which, I mean, they're going to lose against Isengard as a result of how they've decided to approach this, but it doesn't really matter too much for them. I mean, they have an opportunity here to actually claim the high ground. They could sit up here and wait for a while, or if they're feeling particularly bold, they could actually go straight for the town centre. Of course, if they did that, it would immediately force the hand of every other attacking army, and you would see them converge on the town centre, and probably the town centre would become contested before the timer would run down. And you still have to deal with the hobbits that are still in there, so there definitely wouldn't be enough time to do that, but it would be an interesting ploy. More units being committed outside of the walls. Bradford protectors once again rushing forward. We're going to start to see a little bit more of Gondor's strongest units now, though. Axemen of the Sarnak have been the best we've seen on the front line from them so far, but Citadel Guard and Fountain Guard are going to become more prevalent as the game goes on. Very tough, good defensive units. The armour piercing they have also grants them that attacking edge, which will be useful against everyone at this stage. Pelargia Marines are still there, and Lothlorien Honour Guard also still there. So all of Gondor's most important tools are still there. They don't necessarily have the biggest army anymore, but the quality that they can commit later on could prove to be fairly vital. What's occurring over here? The Dwarves running through that one unit of Band of Brass Archers, which may very well actually be cannon fodder's general. Hard to tell. You usually see Samwise stick out a fair amount. Oh yeah, there he is. He's doomed if one of the Mithril Guard gets a hold of him. Mithril Guard and Hammers of Gundabad. Oh, he parried one of the Mithril Guards. A player has admitted defeat. I can only assume that that is Lothlorien. And they have finally given up the ghost. And there goes Samwise. Cleft in twain. But yes, not too surprising, Lothlorien tried to be aggressive and eliminate one of their fellow attackers with an alpha strike, and it didn't work. Perhaps it would have done if it wasn't Mordor and there wasn't a secondary army on the field to come in to help them, but now Wojciech is actually the first one to directly challenge the TC. Like I said, this will force people's hands. I mean, at this point I think Isengard have cooled off on their advance just a little bit. Evan's army over there. Ah, the Great Eagles. And that is something that the hobbits can use. I mean, if they can be micro efficiently, they could be completely devastating. That unit of Nazkai is going to get completely demolished. Their charge is truly, truly scary. Evan may not actually have the ability to withstand that sort of thing either with the losses he's already taken, so he may well have to leave. The problem is, for the Great Eagles, more and more this fight is going to become all about settlement warfare, which the Great Eagles are not very good in. And if they had been used maybe a tad earlier, and the main body of their army had been used a little bit less aggressively, the hobbits might be in a better position than they currently are. It might be a little bit too little too late, but we'll see. If the armies become depleted enough, the Great Eagles, even within the sack, can cycle charge what remains into oblivion, but you need to wait and see if these armies are going to be run down enough for you to accomplish that. As the hobbits continue to charge outside of the walls, continuing to try and slow Tundra's Fox's progress, and he must be getting fairly frustrated at this point because he just can't get into the settlement. The hobbits continue to send more units over here, and again it may very well prove to be to their detriment, because Mordor are here. They are going to take the town centre if this continues, and the only ones that can stop them at this point may very well be Isengard. The Dwarves are also fairly close by. They will have to have something to say about this as well. Hobbits are blocking the path of the Dwarves, however. It'll only be a temporary thing, of course, but it is what it is. Infantry here. Yeah, I mean, they captured the TC. For meta reasons, I feel fairly confident that that timer is not going to last the distance because there's so many frames left in the battle. It just remains to be seen who actually is going to stop them. I can only assume it's going to be Isengard because, well, there goes the other Hobbit general. I don't believe we're going to be seeing a defender victory here. In all of the other Morris scenarios, the defenders have had some sort of say right up to the end, but I really feel as though on this occasion we're not going to see the hobbits be able to do that, which, considering that they're not the best at brute force warfare, we shouldn't be all that surprised that that's the case. 5 Ents. Dwarves are still here, a small army, but a dangerous one, certainly. Mithril Guard at its centre, Sons of the Fallen for a bit of rigidity, and then, of course, the Hands of Gundabad for that damage. You just get through here fairly fast, though, because it's only a matter of time before, instead of the hobbits blocking their way, it may very well be some slightly scarier Gondorians. But can they really afford to get caught on one another at this stage? One's a Minister Theo, still with some AP arrows, potentially. It's not looking good for everyone else at this point. Maybe I should not pay so much. If I wasn't paying so much attention to the frame counter, I would even think that maybe Mordor have really solidified a pretty defensive position over here. That's going to show the dangers, though, of being a little bit too passive in this situation. If you seize an opportunity in a battle like this, where things can get a bit chaotic, it will be very, very difficult for you to come back from that. The other players too, anyway. Champions of, well, actually, no, Mithrandi is there are the Nazgûl. Ents are in and amongst things, and they'll do a fair amount of damage if they stay in and amongst the orc fodder, but they're going to need to try and push their way towards the town centre. And it's going to be the Gondorians, I think, that are ultimately going to stop Mordor from having things all their own way. The Citadel Guard are going to charge into the town centre, and at this point quite a lot of the Mordor units outside of the TC, and there we go. They're having to shore up a defence over here. And of course the flip side to having this sort of approach is that once you've shot your shot, everyone's going to be trying to eliminate you from now on, because you've occupied the town centre, you're in the way of what everyone else wants, and you've already shown yourself to be a danger. Citadel Guard taking damage there, the Citadel Guard going to be able to mop things up here. Could be bad news for Gondor in the long run as well, though, because they were the ones that ultimately came in here to save the day. And now they're also over here with their Nimlothian Honor Guard, but they're in danger of being surrounded by the Dwarves of Khazad Dum. And at this stage, I have no idea what's going to happen. If I were going by numbers, I would maybe give the edge to Isengard. I still have Mavon's Mordor army. I mean, he's over there. He could come to the aid of his ally, who is now in real danger because he's surrounded on all sides by the other attacking armies that still live. So it may be in Mavon's best interest to actually allow his ally to perish and then let the other three go at one another. Yeah, I mean, if I were to say who's in the best position at this stage, I would probably give it to Isengard, but time will tell. All of those Uruk-hai pikemen, very, very useful. Yeah, they've managed to conserve a fair few of their pikes, actually. Uruk-hai infantry are pretty decent basis. They've still got some armour piercing. They maybe don't have the outright quality that the Gondorians and the Dwarves have, or even Mordor, actually. There's Uruk captains over here. And all of a sudden, Tundra's Fox, I wouldn't have sent the Nimlothian Honor Guard over here. This was an avenue of attack that the Dwarves could very easily have handled on their own, but maybe it was a decision made earlier when they were trying to stop the timer and it was too late to pull out once things had got that far, but you may end up losing your Nimlothian Honor Guard for it, and that is ultimately the strongest unit that you have. Fortunately for him, Mordor are not putting up enough resistance, so he's going to be able to charge through here and ultimately make it so that the Dwarves are attacking Mordor instead of him. Mithril Guard with their 3 hit points, incredibly tanky of infantry, of course. Gondor may pride themselves on their own defensive prowess, but they are getting involved in combat with the masters of that sort of warfare now. The Smorgul Chosen themselves aren't that bad at that sort of thing, but the armour piercing of the Citadel Guard should stand them in good stead. Gondor Archers moving forward. Mavon's Mordor army that I think was attempting to come to the aid of his ally is now, I think, going to pull back, seeing that he's not going to be able to make it there in time, and he's ultimately just going to end up taking heavy losses against the Gondorians that are now arriving. Horns of Minister Thiel and Fountain Guard. I mean, to be fair, Gondor themselves actually do have a fairly decent number of units, and that's going to be it for Wojciech, I think. He's just sort of trying to put up one final last stand. His ally no longer going to be able to get there. I think that may have been Mavon's general, actually, which is rather unfortunate. Yes, Isengard. I mean, there's still those Great Eagles, but they are sort of just hanging around out here, biding their time, which they need to do. They need to just be patient here. Isengard would perhaps be the worst choice to target as well because of the pikes they still have available to them, so you really do need to... If you wait too long though, Isengard could end up being the ones that are in an insurmountable position. Khazad Dum electing not to attack the TC just yet. There's some farmers of Buckland over here, so the hobbits are still proving to be an annoyance throughout the settlements. The dwarves going to mop up what remains of this resistance now. There are the Great Eagles. Are they going to go after the dwarves? Try and go after those hounds. They don't have the best charge. They need to be a little bit careful of the stakes. They are cavalry after all, so stakes do affect them rather paradoxically, but it's the only way to make this unit work. You can't fly over anything that can't be traversed by normal cavalry. To do such things you would need to edit the source files of the game, which you cannot do in the Steam version. I don't even know if it would be possible in the non-Steam version where you can do such edits. Once Minister Thiel moving in, more Citadel Guard, more Fountain Guard. Some out of ammunition Gondor Archers just for numbers' sake. Fountain Guard moving forward, continuing to try and put the screws to what's left of Meven's army. We need to be a little bit careful though. Uruk Captains and Temple Executioners together are two very strong units. And Meven does still have a few more units out here. There's Dunedain Rangers and Froggy. So still, other than Lothlorien, everyone still has a say in this fight. In Lothlorien Guard at this stage, Gondor, slowly but surely, could claim control of the settlement, and then Lothlorien Guard should be able to finish off with the assistance of the Citadel Guard what remains of the Uruk Captains and the Nazgul. The problem is, as soon as they do so, the entirety of the Isengard army is waiting for them. That depleted unit of Orcs of Khazad Dum is chipping away at them, but it's not going to do damage all that quickly to the armour-clad Uruk-hai and half-orcs. Where did those Great Eagles go? There's Morgul chosen that are routing. You'd think you'd be able to see the Great Eagles and not lose track of them. They do tend to stand out, but here we are. This is the situation we're in. Warns of Minister Thiel getting shot up pretty badly. WK, not a fool, realising the potential damage that those armour-piercing missiles can cause to his chances of winning the fight, so he's going to try and eliminate them. Really, a lot of what Gondor have at their disposal at this point is what Isengard will likely be using their crossbows on. The dwarves are a threat, but they have a significantly smaller army than the Gondorians. Isengard and Gondor, the two big boys on the battlefield at this point. The dwarves, Mordor and the hobbits having to take a back seat for the time being, but that could very well change. Is that the Great Eagles over there? Yep, there they are. Hanging out. One of them has fallen since last we saw them. They still have ammunition here, the Dunedain Rangers. No, they don't, but a little bit surprised once again that this potentially is Mordor the target they're going to throw these 31 Rangers into. I don't really see... Oh, there's a lot of dead Great Eagles there. Going over the stakes, which you hate to see it. Hard to see amongst all the bodies, but ultimately the hobbits themselves would have been the ones who placed those stakes. Always a tragedy when you run into your own battlefield traps. And this could be it. I mean, this is a significant moment in this battle now. Gondor and Isengard throwing themselves at one another. The pikes of Isengard and perhaps the more well-rounded nature of them against the quality that Gondor still possesses. Who will win? I mean, Isengard can concentrate their force a little bit more. Gondor maybe do not have that luxury. I mean, I think they're going to have to, though. I think they're going to have to leave themselves somewhat open to an attack from Mordor. Otherwise, I think Isengard are going to have the strength to carry the day. Balance of forces evenly matched. The support of those Uruk-hai crossbowmen could prove to be fairly decisive as well. Fully upgraded Gondor Archers. The armour will help them defensively, but offensively they're still in a bit of a sticky spot against the likes of Uruk-hai infantry. Berserkers being sent over here by WK, perhaps as a means of delaying the dwarves from coming forward, not wanting to risk the dwarves attacking him instead of Gondor. The Berserkers are going to come over here to block the advance, and hopefully, I'm sure he's hoping that that time that it buys him will be enough for him to solidify his position within the TC. Only time will tell. Still that Fountain Guard acting as the rear guard, the backstop against a potential Mordor advance. The catapult, the Mordor catapult, hitting square into the middle of those Gondor Archers and breaking them. I don't know who they're actually going after here, but I would be really, really tempted to go after Isengard, because you can see already here they are coming out on top of this fight against the Gondorians, but from this distance, when the catapult fires in, you don't have that much choice about what it hits. A decent hit there into a unit, but it is only Dunlending Clansmen. WK will be fairly happy that that's the unit that took the brunt of that punishment. Nothing going around here, and he's going to try and hit Isengard from the rear now, which will allow a little bit more freedom for the Gondorians. They have this other unit of Fountain Guard that can now be committed. The other players on the field at this point perhaps seeing Isengard for the threat that they are, and this means WK is going to have to now try and win the battle from here instead of waiting for another opportunity. I think this is going to have to be it, and it may be that if, with all the players choosing to gang up on him, Isengard may be the ones to fall next. Mithril Guard defeat seems certain. Are you sure? Against Uruk-hai crossbows? Do you want to rethink about that game? Yeah, victory seems certain for the Mithril Guard now. Dunedain Rangers from Froggy, some Snaga skirmishers from WK. It's going to have to try and intercept Mevon's army here, headed up by those Temple Executioners. There's not an awful lot of quality other than that. There's a few Uruk captains, but that's it. And Temple Guard. They still have ammunition there. Mordor could yet have something to say about who wins this fight. The Gondorian general falls. Bad news for them. Morale could yet prove to be fairly decisive here, because Gondor are not getting the most help from Khazad Dum at this point, and it may be that Isengard can still defeat the Gondorians before everything else has a chance to play out. And once again, as we've seen in several battles recently, the Uruk-hai pikemen proving to be the stalwarts at the heart of the Isengard war effort, doing very, very nicely for themselves. Close to hitting the Gondorians once again, but they actually did manage to hit Isengard, and that's a big rout. Fairly decisive there. Mevon giving the Gondorians a helping hand, and that is just going to be enough to give them enough of a break, I think, to continue this assault for a little while longer. No one has yet gained control of the town centre. This is all that remains of the dwarves, but it might be all they need come the end of the battle. If things get dicey and everyone has a low amount of units, the Mithril Guard on their own may prove to be too much for a lot of other units to deal with. Maybe the temple units that Mevon still has at his disposal could be enough. Snaga skirmishers, Dunlending Clansmen, a lot of these units are routing. I don't really see Isengard winning from this position at this point. Even if they still look to be doing good works against Gondor, I don't think they can beat Gondor quickly enough, and I think Mordor are going to arrive, and then pikes or no pikes, their formation is going to be soundly dealt with, I believe. Temple Guardsmen. Is this going to be the moment where Mordor once again make a play for the town centre? Can they make it stick this time? Froggy's Dunedain Rangers. Someone has taken control of the town centre, and that someone is almost certainly Isengard. I highly doubt they're going to be able to make that stick, because those Fountain Guard could simply turn around at any moment. The dwarves could move forward. Where are the dwarves actually? What have they done? They're going this way. Not entirely certain why. Maybe they're hoping that in the transition to another road to the town centre they will be forgotten about, but surely they aren't going to be that foolish. This is going to force Mevon's hand somewhat. They are going to have to claim the TC. Isengard may abandon the TC actually to try and take that target off their back.
We've lost control of the city.
Will Mevin decide to try and claim the TC? He's got Minas Morgul chosen as well. I mean, on close inspection, this army is actually perhaps the most dangerous on the field at this point. It might be worth his time to try and claim the TC from here, to be honest. He still has artillery support for a start. Where did that go? There it is. A little bit surprised, honestly, that the Great Eagles haven't come over here. I mean, there is a dead Great Eagle over here, so maybe they did. There they are, through the trees. Yeah, I think with Mevin in the position he's in, you need to try and get rid of his artillery support. I mean, if nothing else, these are trolls that could be used later in the battle as well. But the Great Eagles will be able to mop them up, so the catapult, which hasn't been that decisive to be fair, it's been more of an annoyance for the other players, rather than anything that's really done much in this battle. But yeah, I mean, Mevin, he's just poked his nose into the TC, he's claimed it, someone is going to have to try and stop him from just sitting there indefinitely. Isengard continuing to run around the streets at this point, as are Gondor, as are the Dwarves, who I think, yeah, they doubled back. Not entirely sure what the thinking was behind going that way anyway. But, I guess ×2 speed. As Mordor continue to hang out in the TCs. I mean, the Dwarves probably can contest the TC fairly easily, as can the Gondorians. I mean, it's almost like a game of chicken, like, you try and stop Mordor, no you! Because everyone knows that the first ones into the town centre are very likely to get a knife in the back for their troubles. But if they all do nothing, Mordor win unopposed. The only true winners of this, well, I mean, even then, like Mevin, he is in danger of getting surrounded here, which is what I think Isengard are planning on doing, but with the quality they have, I would actually form up a defensive position in the town centre fully if I were Mevin. Because at this point, everyone's going to be gunning for you regardless of what you do. Hounds of Gundabad moving forward, cutting it a little bit close here. The 1.5 minute mark comes and then goes. And there we go. Very bizarre kind of Mexican standoff at this point. Everyone, at one point or another in this fight, has been aggressive. No one's been sat on the periphery for too long. But now, they've all paid the price for being aggressive at various points in the battle, so now, who is going to blink first? I mean, the Dwarves are fairly committed here. Hammers of Gundabad are moving in, but they really don't stand a chance against the Temple Executioners. Trying to chip away at the strength that Mordor still has available to them. You know, we are now very much within the final 10,000 frames, so this is the final stage. Everyone looking a little bit punch drunk at this point in the battle. And even the hobbits are still alive to a certain extent. Great Eagles are somewhere around because they can hide anywhere. It's a little bit difficult to ascertain what it is they're actually doing. There are Dunedain Rangers somewhere around here, so yeah, Dunedain Rangers and Great Eagles for the hobbits is still a potential banana skin for everyone, especially those Great Eagles. If they decide to charge into someone, it can get pretty ugly for them. There's also armor-piercing missiles from the Temple Guard, which is a problem. These Gondorian Fountain Guards, row by row, are getting scythed down. Temple Executioners will be enough to finish off the Hammers of Gundabad, but because they're a locked morale unit, they will have to do things the old-fashioned way by simply killing them all. Isengard's starting to put pressure on Mordor's backlines. Minas Morgul chosen are there to stand in the way. That's not enough pikes to start forcing those spears onto the defensive either. You know, 2 depleted at this point. And perhaps Gondor are charging in here as a result of the Temple Guard, but I think they see that they're in real trouble at this point. A lots of projectiles coming in, doing lots of damage to those Fountain Guard. Is this where we see Gondor fall by the wayside once and for all? And now the Dwarves are moving in, which is fairly aggressive. Committing everything other than their Mithril Guard. They may as well commit them at this point though as well, really. If this is what they're going to try and do, if they're going to try and claim the TC. Which they will be able to do. I mean, the Fountain Guard are in the corner here, preventing the Dwarves from capping it right now, but... maybe a bit of politics going on here though. I think Gondor giving the Dwarves a free run at Mordor from this side, Isengard attacking from the other. Everyone does recognise that at this point Mordor are the strongest force left on the field. A shower of javelins coming into the Mithril Guard. Those Temple Executioners, I mean, they have taken damage at the hands of the armor piercing of their hands have been bad, and with the reinforcements of the Sons of the Fallen, it's no longer a given that these Black Numenorians win this fight. Mithril Guard falling back in the face of the Orc Javelins. Yeah, and I mean, with all the players ganging up on him, I don't think, again, how quickly the tables turn in a battle like this. Mevin no longer in the driving seat. Orc Javelins continue to fire their missiles. Temple Guard moving over here. Orc Javelins routing in the face of fire arrows used by the Orc Javelins. That's an interesting move as well. The Great Eagles, perhaps seeing things are becoming a little bit too formulaic, cannon fodder charges into Isengard, who stand to gain the most, I would say, given the fact that other than Mordor they are still, even though they don't have the same level of quality left, they are still the healthiest force. Maybe not so much after a swift charge from those Great Eagles though. It's a dangerous game to play with pikes still on this front line. Temple Guard and Uruk captains on this front line now as well, so it's a little bit less of a clear-cut victory for them. Orc Javelins routing. And the team who this is the best news for, ultimately, is the Dwarves, because I don't think Gondor have got the strength to stop the Dwarves if they decide to capture the town centre. Mordor no longer have the ability to just... well, I guess they can peel off from the Isengard front line, but they'll take a lot of damage doing so. Isengard may be seeing the threat that the Dwarves now pose. It's a lot of routing. Warns of Minas Ithil pulling back a little bit. Mithril Guard. I mean, the Fountain Guard are a threat to the Mithril Guard, but the Dwarves will have what it takes, I think. Dunedain Rangers.
Our foe has taken control. The enemy is no longer in command of the city.
Temple Guard. We could try and move forward into the Orc Hunters, the Mithril Guard. Things are likely to descend into more chaos at this point. I don't think the Gondorians have too much left. It might be that one unit of Wardens of Minas Ithil that they have. Only 8 of them. So Gondor very much on their knees at this point. Do the Dwarves have the outright quality to be able to weather the Orcish storm? Where are those Great Eagles? Not over there, that's Dunedain Rangers. You still... well, there they are. I mean, like I said, the Great Eagles, they're still alive enough to the point where they can actually win the battle for the Hobbits at this point if they charge in at smart intervals. That unit of Dunedain Rangers as well gives the Hobbits some kind of ability to fight in sustained combat. Not a great deal, but this is it. This is really the moment of the fight where things will be decided. Isengard maybe once again will be feeling a little bit more confident. It's still got fairly numerous units of infantry to be backed up with pikes. The Mithril Guard are really strong, however. Mevin, Temple Guard, while they may be very good in melee, they are still outclassed by the Dwarven unit they are opposing. They're also somewhat surrounded thanks to these Orc Hunters. Is that a rout? It is. Black Numenorians rout, and they were actually doing a bit of damage here. Flitz will be breathing a sigh of relief. And now, Khazad Dum and Isengard have to be the main contenders, but in spite of their extremely aggressive practices, the hobbits may yet win this fight. Dunedain Rangers coming over here. The Great Eagles. The real question is, what do they actually go after here? If the Great Eagles choose the wrong moment to charge in, then they may very well end up only being the kingmaker for either Khazad Dum or Isengard. I'd be stunned if Gondor somehow managed to come back into this. I mean, Mebban's still alive. Here come the Great Eagles. They charge into the Orc Hunters, in addition to the Dunedain Rangers. It's going to be the end of the Dwarven Archers, but Sons of the Fallen are now over here, so a good countermeasure against the Great Eagles. 6 Temple Executioners remain. I mean, this is the problem. Uruk-hai infantry. Is that a rout? No. I don't know if WK can afford to play these kind of games anymore, where he's taking men off the front line. You're just asking to rout when you do that at this stage in the competition. They did get a charge there into the Mithril Guard, though, the Great Eagles, and that is one method that you can use to do damage to them at this point. The Great Eagles are honestly the most dangerous entity on the field at this point. There's only 5 of them left, however. They need to be really quite careful. There goes another one of them. Charging into, other than the Uruk-hai pikemen that remain, the Sons of the Fallen are one of the unit you really don't want to be getting involved with. The Dunedain Rangers trying their best to do some damage to the plate-clad dwarves. You need to stay away from them, however. The charge into the Mithril Guard, so far, the faction that this has benefited the most would be Isengard. 19 of them remain, but honestly that might still be enough. We are at that point in the battle now where even extremely depleted units are going to have their part to play. Going after what remains of the Temple Executioners from Mordor, who are still here. Those 8 Wardens of Minas Ithil could yet prove to be decisive. Mithril Guard and Uruk-hai getting flattened by the Great Eagles there. They need to get out of there quickly. And indeed they will. There's still Orc Javelin, 76 of them, but 1 charge from the Great Eagles or anything else of quality will be enough to finish them off. What is going on here? I hear there's Dunedain Rangers who are routing, so Froggy no longer has any part left to play. I mean, the Wardens of Minas Ithil are shooting. What are they shooting at? Who do they see as their greatest threat? Mithril Guard. I mean, the Dwarves hold the town centre at this point. They're getting shot. Where did the Eagles go? 46 Uruk-hai infantry is not going to be enough against Sons of the Fallen and Mithril Guard, even as depleted and bloodied as they are. Did the Great Eagles perish? Surely not. No, they're over there. There's only 2 of them remain though. They maybe have 1 effective charge left in them. They're going to abandon the town centre here, the Dwarves, perhaps because they simply cannot afford to continue getting shot by the Wardens of Minas Ithil, and if they still have a lot of ammunition, which I'm guessing they do because they got pummeled before they got a chance to use that ammunition, they could, in theory, just sit there and shoot until the Dwarves are dead. Isengard claim the town centre for their very own. This unit of Uruk-hai infantry, really all they have left. 1 pikeman. Very bizarre fight. Adonai Lancers, 2 of them remain? 11? Well, this is probably where Isengard's efforts come to an end. Maybe not. I mean, 17 Sons of the Fallen, 7 Mithril Guard against 42 Uruk-hai infantry. In all likelihood they're going to rout. What are those armor-piercing missiles going after this 1 pike? He survived a few of those that hit him. He almost certainly won't survive as this battle goes on, however. Mithril Guard trying to pull away from this front line now. The Uruk-hai infantry are wavering, both of them trying to pull away from one another, and this is why the shadow of the Great Eagle looms large. They need to get out of here though, because unfortunately for them, the Sons of the Fallen are the ones that they are closest to. They do get out of there though. The Great Eagles will only be able to continue to be the threat that they are in this battle as long as there's more than one faction for them to face. Unless it's Gondor, I suppose. One charge against the Warns of Minister Theo would flatten them, even with only 2 Great Eagles, but a player has admitted defeat. Who do you suppose? It's not Gondor. Could be Wojciech, his army's been gone for a while. Could be Froggy. His units are still running around the settlement like headless chickens as they rout. And come the Great Eagles again. I mean, this... It would be fairly sensational if they were to win this fight, the Hobbits, with 2 Great Eagles. They're gonna try and go after the Warns of Minas Tirith, perhaps seeing the danger that they pose, and that's going to be it for the Gondorians, I think. There goes Balin. I think that was actually the correct move. Gondor are now gone from the battle, but so too is their ability to simply shoot outside of the settlement until everyone, or the town centre until everyone else is dead. The Uruk-hai infantry, there's 28 of them that remain. I think the Great Eagles are going to be enough here. I don't think they have any answer to that. Isengard gone. They've routed. I don't think they're going to come back. 1 Mithril Guardsman remains. There goes the Mithril Guard. 2 Great Eagles. 1 Uruk-hai Pikeman. Please don't kill your units like this, I was going to say. The Great Eagles don't have a melee attack, so you have to charge into them. The charge is all they have. Isengard is still there, but I mean, surely 1 charge is going to be enough to kill 1 unit. They missed. Incredible scenes. After all of the good work they've done, if they fail to kill off this 1 pikeman waddling around the town centre thanks to RNG alone. I think Mevon's cavalry was killed at some point, possibly by the Warns of Minister Theo, because based on the frames, this is it. This is the... Again, they need to land a charge. Well, I mean, this is going to be it. 1v1. Among the field of corpses, a Great Eagle against a single pikeman. And he lands his charge eventually. And this, I guess, is the closest battle I've ever shown. Because there is 1 unit left alive. A singular Great Eagle stands victorious among the carnage in the town centre. And the Hobbits win. The defenders, despite my naysaying, did end up winning. And it came about as a result of probably the best use of the Great Eagles we've seen in this situation. A lot of people will tend to save them for too long or use them too quickly. More so the latter, but there you have it. The Hobbits managing to pull out the victory here in this characteristically chaotic siege free-for-all that Morris has made. Ironically, Morris had the least part to play in this battle because he was playing as Lothlorien and they were gone long before everyone else as a result of him trying to maybe neutralise the threat that Mordor posed earlier on. But yeah, I think this is, just based on how close it is, probably the best one that he's made so far. Just as a result of that, I mean, it would have been so unfortunate, I think, for cannon fodder if his Great Eagle had ended up being skewered on that 1 pike. But in the end, I think the charge was always going to land eventually. And yeah, 1 unit remains. As far as who got the most kills, the Dwarves, not too surprising given the fact that they fought a full-strength Mordor army at the start, which is obviously going to be a bit of carnage when you consider the numbers that Mordor brings to the field. And they also had a part to play throughout the battlefield fairly consistently. And there you have it. Let's see what did the damage for Isengard, because that's who we were watching from the perspective of. The Nazkai doing quite nicely. They were committed fairly early and killed fairly early, actually. But they managed to do a lot of damage nonetheless. Crossbows, unsurprisingly, they were used fairly well, I think, by Isengard. Maybe not as well as they could have been. But they went after the Dwarves, they went after the high damage threats from Gondor. When the time came for them to be used, they were. And that was really all you can ask. Champions of the White Hand doing nicely as well. Again, the earlier units that Isengard used tended to be the ones that got more kills, the crossbows aside. Outside of that, decent performances. 8 kills on those Reavers, maybe less so. But But yeah, I think fair play to the Hobbits managing to pull out this victory. So well played to Froggy and Cannon Fodder for managing to be victorious here. Big thank you to Morris for creating the scenario. I believe he sent me the replay as well. I mean, it's been over a month at this point because it's after my work trip that I'm recording this. The first one that I am after that long period of time away. It may have been WK that sent it to me, but regardless. Big thank you to the scenario creator and all the players that were part of this one. Very, very fun to showcase. And because it is now after my work trip, I have a much better idea of what my future schedule is going to be, given the fact that I now have a backlog once again to work my way through, including a episodic series that was sent to me, 3 battles of which that we will make our way through, 2 custom scenarios from Eclipse 2500, 4 Silmarillion battles, albeit because of the fact that multiple versions have passed between the time that they were sent to me while I was away and now. I'm going to have to sort of judge based on the date what version of the game that they were using and update accordingly. That might end up breaking the replays, however, so we'll have to wait and see if all or none of them end up showing up. But yes, 4 Silmarillion replays potentially that will be spread out between now and the end of the year, I would hope. We have another siege that was sent to me by Master Blaster, and we have also a couple of Rohirrim based sieges on both Helm's Deep and Edoras to look forward to. That's a decent backlog. That's a fair. That'll, in terms of Medieval 2 content, if I got sent nothing else, I could probably ration that out to last me until the end of the year, which is good. And hopefully, as well, as I've mentioned already, and potentially will be doing so in a live stream, which I hope will come out before this replay, to be honest. Hopefully we can sprinkle in the initial explorations into Rise of Mordor into that as well. But we shall see. Regardless, once again, big thank you to all the players and Morris for creating the scenario. Hope you enjoyed this, and hope you'll join me for whatever is next.